If we can all agree that books are magic, then libraries are the wizarding world. But have you ever had the less than divine experience of hunting out the poetry section in your local library and finding it totally lacking? In this episode, we're going to lay out a plan to help you fix this, my friends. We will figure out how to suggest poetry books to your local library. Welcome to the Poetry Lab podcast. The Poetry Lab started 11 years ago to help dedicated, self-taught, and formally trained writers find a place in their community to write, read, learn, and collaborate. We help writers tap into their craft with radical self-compassion, unlike anything you've ever seen in a creative writing classroom before. If you're a creative person trying to establish a writing practice in the real world, this podcast is designed to help you carve out the time, the courage, and the inspiration to keep writing your new shit. Are you ready, poet? Let's get into it. Hello, my friends. I'm Danielle, and I'm so happy you're here with me today at the Poetry Lab podcast. Today's topic is probably near and dear to many of your hearts because as readers and writers, libraries are so magical to us. My favorite library is called the Armacross Library, and it's at my alma mater, the University of Redlands. It's probably the only library I've ever spent hours upon hours inside. I studied there, hid there, wrote papers and poetry there. I've combed through the stacks enjoying the book smell. I've dreamed of my future life as a writer there. I've imagined all the worlds I'd travel. My best friend and former college roommate and I had equally fond memories in this place. We revisited it just last fall for our 15-year college reunion. I know, cringe, right? 15 years. And that's not the worst part. The worst part is that we met some freshmen during the reunion who currently lived in our former freshman year dorm. And when they asked us what year we lived in that dorm, well, when we said the year out loud, they all made these weird, funny faces. And we couldn't figure out why until we realized that it was literally the year they were born. So, it was brutal. But anyway, I really do love that library, and visiting it again just brought me back to this time of my life when the library held such power and such magic because I wanted to be a writer, and the library was where all the books lived. So let's get into how we can suggest your local library carry more of the poetry books you love and would love to read. Libraries are one of the few places where anyone can access literature for free. But poetry sections often don't get the love they deserve. By suggesting poetry books, especially from indie authors or diverse voices, you can help build a more inclusive and rich literary selection for others to discover, as well as books on the shelves for you to read yourself. When you request a book to your library, you're actively helping to shape that library's collection. So here are some practical tips for how to suggest poetry books. The process for suggesting books can vary from library to library. Most of them have a system in place for this exact purpose. Here are some key tips for suggesting books to your library. First, check the catalog. Before submitting a request, do a quick search in the library's catalog to make sure that they don't already have the book or have it on order. This can save you time and help you avoid duplicate requests. Next, you're going to want to gather the book's information. Most libraries will ask for the basic details about the book that you're suggesting. Here's what you should have ready: the full title of the book, the author's name, year and month of publication, and its ISBN number. This is a unique number used to identify the book. You can usually find it on Goodreads, the author's website, or if you Google the book, it's also on the back of the book itself by the barcode. Some libraries may also ask for the publisher's name and why you think this book should be added to the collection, so it wouldn't hurt to write down a few sentences to answer that question before you go into request. Many libraries have a suggest a title or request a purchase section on their website. For example, in Southern California, the Los Angeles Public Library has a request form you can fill out. You just hover over the Services and Programs section, click on Ask a Librarian, and you'll find a link to suggest a book. Be ready to provide the title, author, ISBN, and format you're looking for, print, audio, or digital. You can even get a few friends to submit the same request to show there's community interest. That might be especially good to you if your own book is out and you want to get it on library shelves. You can follow up with your library. After you submit the request, you have to be patient. Libraries receive many suggestions and it can take time to process them. However, if you want to follow up, you can always check with your local librarian or periodically check the catalog to see if the book has been added. One of my main tips here is to be ready to share why the book matters. Some libraries might ask you why they should purchase the book you're suggesting, and I think it's wise of them to do so. This is where you get to pitch the book. You explain why it's a great fit for the library's collection, whether it's locally relevant, it's a diverse voice, or simply a book you think would really resonate with the readers in your community. There are also programs that can help you suggest books to your local library, such as Zip Books. If you're in Southern California, some libraries, like the Long Beach Public Library, have a program called Zip Books, ZIP Books, where they'll order books from Amazon and let you borrow them directly. Once you've read the book, you donate it back to the library and it becomes part of their collection. If your library doesn't have an easy suggestion portal, or if you're looking for even more ways to help, you can reach out directly to your librarian. In a perfect world, they'll be happy to assist, even thrilled when you want to take an active role in curating the library's collection. This may not, of course, always be true, but let's hope that librarians are the Miss Frizzle of our hearts. Libraries are community spaces. And the hope is that librarians are people among us who really want to see their collections reflect the needs and interests of the people they serve. Why is it important for writers and poets to take an active role in building better poetry sections? Well, poetry is often underrepresented in library collections compared to more popular genres like fiction or nonfiction. Why? For one reason, there's lower demand. It's a smaller audience compared to other genres. According to sources like American Libraries Magazine and the NEA, only about 9.2% of U.S. adults read poetry. That was in 2022. This lower readership results in less demand for poetry books in libraries, where collection decisions are often driven by circulation statistics. As a poet, you know that poetry goes beyond the niche. We were taught in school that it was either silly or complicated, but once you learn to think in poems, the inner world of language opens wide to you. And that's a feeling that we as poets are always eager to share. By helping your local library's poetry collection get bigger, you're not just supporting the authors you love, you're creating more opportunities for new readers to discover poetry. Libraries are often a great place to consider programming as well. Does your local library have a room you could rent out to teach a generative writing workshop? Is there a space where they could have a poetry reading or an open mic? Libraries are fun to collaborate with. Just keep in mind they often don't have much of a budget, so these events would need to be free or donated. Another way to contribute to your local library is to donate poetry books of your own. Many libraries will accept donations, though they typically need to be in good condition and relevant to the library's needs. You can check if they have any special programs where donated books are added to their collection, or they might sell them to help raise funds for the library. You might even consider taking a few copies of your book to your local library and seeing if they'll accept them as a donation. I would caution you, though, if your book is a staple-bound chapbook or if it is self-published, they may not take it. Before we finish up here today, let's think about how to find books to suggest to your library. If you're new to reading poetry or you simply haven't been exploring widely yet, no worries, I've got you covered. I have a plan to help you find poetry books that you could suggest. At the Poetry Lab, we publish a new poetry resource every week, and many of those articles are packed full of poem examples, book recommendations, backstories, and even sometimes charming connections to poets. They're perfect resources to excavate to find books that we could suggest to our local library. I'm going to talk about some of those titles now. You can go ahead to the show notes page for this episode to get links to explore them later. First, Poetry Power Couples by Anne-Marie Wells. This article highlights pairs of poets whose work resonates not only on the page, but also throughout their lives. It's a pretty fun and unique way to discover new poets to read and their books. 7 Secrets to Unlock the Beauty of Reading Poetry Books by Kelsey Bryan-Zwick is an article full of ideas of how to read poetry books, how to make poetry books more engaging, and which books to read. So I highly recommend you checking it out. Another article by Kelsey, 10 AAPI Poets to Read This Year, is full of suggestions for Asian American and Pacific Islander poets. Definitely a list of must-reads. 5 Contemporary Latina and Chicana Poets Who Remind Me I'm a Poeta Too by Marilyn Ramirez shares a heartfelt collection of Latina and Chicana poets who have deeply influenced her identity as a writer. Next, the poet I fell in love with this year, Kristen O'Keefe Aptowitz. This is by our fellow podcast host, Lori Walker, and it's a love letter to Kristen O'Keefe Aptowitz's work. I highly recommend this poet. She has many books to choose from, and she is one of the funniest writers I have ever read on the page. And finally, another selection from our podcasting team. Bridgette Bianca recently did an episode called Sing a Black Girl's Song, 5 Books by Black Women Poets You Should Know. And I highly recommend every single book that she pointed to in that episode. They would be perfect to recommend to your local library if they aren't there already. So next time you're browsing your local library's shelves and notice the poetry section could use some love, remember you have the power to do something about it. Libraries thrive on their community's involvement, and by suggesting books, you're not only supporting the poets and authors you love, but you're helping out folks in your community by making those poetry books more accessible to them. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Poetry Lab podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you're listening now, and don't be afraid to join us soon at the Poetry Lab. I would be happy to see you there. I'm Danielle. You can find me on Instagram at ImaginaryDanny or follow up with me at thepoetrylab.com. That's all for now. I hope to see you soon at the Poetry Lab.